Welcome to World in a Frame. My name is Rasmus. I'm a teacher from Denmark, and like everybody here, I love movies. Risha?
Yes, that's correct. I also love movies. I am a researcher in the sort of medical field. But yeah, I love watching films and discussing them in my spare time.
Um, Hi, I'm Philip. Um, I study at Bocconi University in Milan, and I'm also a cinephile.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I'm a film student from Austria, and yes, obviously also very much interested in film. Uh,
Yeah. And Thomas, you were the one who picked the movie for this time. Please tell us what have we been watching?
um, yeah, so for today, I actually picked an Austrian movie for once, so some representation for my country. But whether or not it's good representation, I think is up to you to decide. But I think it's because I can maybe spoil already. I'm not like the biggest fan of this film, but I think it's very interesting and a very important historical document. It's a film called Die Stadt ohne Juden, or in English, The City Without Jews. And from the name alone, I always figured this is like some kind of anti-Semitic Nazi propaganda trash, like Jud Süß or something like that. But then when I actually watched it, I watched it in a cinema actually from the Austrian Film Archive, who are the people that actually restored the film. So shout out to you guys, you did a great job preserving it. And yeah, when I watched this film, I was really surprised that this isn't like anti-Semitic propaganda. It's a parody of that. It's like a political satire, really. Because what is this film about? It's about basically Vienna in the present time back then, in so 1924 Vienna. The city in the film is called Utopia, very subtle, blah blah. But in the book, this is based on, I think it actually is Vienna, and it was shot in Vienna, obviously. And uh, yeah, the economic state of affairs, so to speak, is very poor. People are losing their jobs. People don't have enough to eat, and the film very cleverly juxtaposes this with the kind of rich aristocrats in the city that have they live in abundance and all that. But the people on the street that are demonstrating, they're looking for a scapegoat, and instead of you know. Turning their rage against the upper class that are actually like hurting them, they choose the Jewish people of the city, which is like painfully prophetic if we look at what Austria became less than a decade later, when it became part of Nazi Germany. And yeah, you may also see some parallels to modern day politics without getting too much into it just yet. But anyways, the story continues that they actually pass a law that forces the Jewish people to leave the city. And we see these really terrifying shots with the hindsight that we have of all these trains filled with Jewish people leaving Austria. And of course, it immediately reminds us of the Holocaust and people being shipped off to concentration camps, which at that point in time, again, wasn't a thing yet. yeah, this really surprised me when I watched this. And then what surprised me even more is this is maybe the only part that genuinely made me laugh out loud, was that pretty much immediately the people realized this is such a dumb idea to lose like so much of your population when you're already in financial trouble, and suddenly you have way less people working, you have way less people buying and selling stuff, and of course the economy collapses even further. I think it's yeah, that's really well done. Just how immediate this effect is in the film, and then the rest of the film is basically the attempt of our protagonists to get the law revoked. And of course, they succeed. And yeah, this is where the film, in my opinion, gets a bit weak, because then it kind of turns into this very typical early 1920s like melodrama, romance, kind of wannabe comedy thing, and all that character stuff. I think is not that good. But political satire itself, I think, is at the very least interesting. It's not like super sophisticated or anything, but yeah, it's fascinating, especially considered in its historical context. And yeah, with that, I open the discussion up to you. What did you guys think of it?
Great. So, Risha, what did you think?
Yeah, I yeah, I sort of I did get into this film. I guess the version that we watched had some I guess newer audio. Maybe I'm not sure where the audio accompaniment came from, or whether it sounded like a sort of newer composition. And I did hear that when the film was restored, there was some, I figured maybe it came from that process and the screenings that that happened around that time. So the film itself, yeah, I did kind of enjoy it. I guess it's sort of it has a very kind of straightforward linear narrative structure, and it's sort of broadly in 3 acts, so it's quite easy to kind of follow, even though it's a silent film, which I guess maybe from the perspective of like the 21st century, it's not can be a bit more difficult, I suppose. Maybe I did think that the final part was the one where first when the Jews kind of returned to this utopia place, Vienna, I kind of started to question sort of where were they sent to, where did they go, and why would they even want to come back, and so it was I would say weak or lacking verisimilitude maybe at that point, because I guess in the real world there'd be a lot of complexity to that, but that's not what the film was trying to do. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it there. But I was quite interested in the book as well, and then the guy who made the film. But I'll hand it over to Philip.
I guess I actually liked this film. I think the score was actually really great. It was by Olga Neuwirth, who also composed an opera based on the film by David Lynch, Lost Highway. And I think this score actually added this Lynchian sensibility to this expressionist film. I think it was present in the film, but also the score made it more clearer, I guess. This dreamlike atmosphere. This kind of bad dream, like, for example, Lost Highway, it's also a very bad dream, I guess, in a way. And other Lynchian films. So I really liked that. Also, of course, it's a political satire, but I think this melodrama story makes it this satire relatable on a personal level. So there's this drama of Jews being expelled and them being allowed to return and all those stuff, but we see the impact of this pseudo-historical stuff, at least at that time, on the personal level. This protagonist who isn't a woman who is in love with a man, but they have to, the man has to leave and then decides to return and be with his beloved woman and help the Jews to return. And I was moved a bit by this. I think this political satire and melodrama work together perfectly and create more meaning than on its own. I guess that's two things I did note about this film.
Yeah.
But actually, it was actually interesting to watch Expressionist film. It was the second one I've watched after Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And right after watching this film, I watched Metropolis, and I really, really loved it. It was much more powerful than The City Without Jews, but still, I guess.
Yeah. I guess Thomas is he's very happy or something that you compared it to Lynch.
That I'm not so happy about, but I'm happy that you watched Metropolis.
You have to mention him at least once for some random reason.
No. I just got out of watching the entirety of Twin Peaks: The Return at the cinema like a week ago. I'm still traumatized by it, but not in the way that was intended, I think.
Well, I think this movie, I think I found it more interesting than enjoyable. To be honest, at sort of at a personal level, it didn't really do anything for me. I don't think as such that it's a good movie, but I think it's an interesting movie, and especially. Also you said, Thomas, it's being sort of prophetic about what's gonna happen, and that's what makes it interesting. I also noticed the music and sort of because some of the scenes, especially in the beginning, it's almost that if they had put on some other music, it would almost be sort of slapstick or something. I constantly thought about if they had that the music, the atmosphere it's creating, but it's not really a part of the old movie. So I thought of I sort of thought about that for a while. I guess that one of the weakest thing about the movie is that it's sort of when everything is explained in economic terms. The problem with expelling the Jews is that the economy collapses, and the sole reason for them bringing them back is also, we restored the economy, great, and everybody is happy. And there's absolutely no mentioning about how we are treating people and so on. And also, I found it rather peculiar that the way it is done is actually that they are sort of rigging the election. That it's not that they have of course, then there's something about they need 2/3 of the vote, a majority, to make this new law. But the thing that they make this happen is that our main character simply sort of drugs one of the politicians so that he can't attend this democratic voting. I thought that's actually sort of a strange way to to succeed and be the hero, and that sort of it brings up some interesting thoughts about democracy and so on, and maybe also sort of how they still portray the Jewish community in this movie. But yeah, an interesting movie that I probably didn't like as much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I agree with most of what all of you guys said, basically. I especially really like, Philip, that you said you also enjoyed the more melodramatic elements, because that was also something that I didn't really get into, but I think if you actually connect to these characters, then a lot of the criticism that we three gave kind of falls apart, at least to an extent, because yes, the main argument is an economic one, maybe, or that's where a lot of the focus is. But there is this try to have a personal story about someone who is in love with a Jewish person and he gets expelled and has to kind of sneak back into the country and stuff. So it's in the film, even if to me personally it also wasn't super effective. But another thing I like about the economic argument, that they're not doing this super personal drama, because a lot of the arguments that you will hear to this day from people who kind of want to exclude people from their country or whatever, look at America, for example, at the present day, a lot of these arguments are economical arguments. Like, they're taking away our jobs, they're not working, they're abusing the social system or whatever. And then going explicitly at these economical arguments, like how stupid it is to expel thousands of people that are creating the economy in order to better the economy, that makes zero sense. And I do think that's at least an admirable attempt. Yeah. And another thing I want to mention, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, please cut me off at any point. But another thing I want to mention, because that's also something very interesting about this film, and also kind of a part of the reason why I picked this, is that we can kind of view it as on a more aesthetic, like film level, I guess, and then on the level of political satire and political analysis. And to comment on the film level for another second, because Philip, you already mentioned that it's broadly considered to be an expressionist movie. That's also something I found very interesting while watching it, because, for example, the poster is very clearly very expressionistic. So yeah, you could almost expect something like Caligari, which really drives expressionism to its maximum. But there's really only one scene in this film that I would say is like this explicitly expressionistic, which is towards the end, where one of the antagonists is kind of trapped in this prison cell with all these stars of David surrounding him, and this really looks like something straight out of Caligari. I thought it was a really visually striking scene, whereas the rest of the film is more naturalistic. Yeah, I'm not sure how to interpret it, I guess. But I'm sorry, yeah, if someone wants to respond to anything, or...
So I also think that the film also commented on Christianity, and so this utopia is supposedly Christian nation, but they also decide to expel Jews also that have converted to Christianity. And in the end, where this guy organizes this leaflets uh, under the name of the Federation of True Christians. I think this shows what true Christianity should be, that true Christians shouldn't expel people or discriminate against people of other ethnicities and religions, and it's written in the Bible about that. But the people that are supposedly Christian do not follow Christianity, and there is this comment outside of, just economical terms, but also about what it means to be a true Christian, in a way. I liked this. And also, there is this deadline that's given, it's Christmas, so like, supposedly Christ is born, new life is born, and for Jews, it's the end of their life in this city. I think it's also a metaphor. And also, there is this scene in the end, this expressionistic, where this person is actually locked, I think not in a prison, but in a madhouse. So he is kind of forced to live in a nightmare. He was fighting against Jews, and now he has to live in a madhouse with stars of David everywhere. I think outside of, direct economic reasoning and also political reasoning, and I think it's what this person did in Parliament, distracting attention of a member of Parliament is, okay, at least in movie standards. In an American movie, this member of Parliament probably would have been killed. So, yeah.
Can I just ask a question? Just coming back to the, that this film is labeled an expressionist film, and I guess, I need a bit of help understanding what are the other, apart from that scene that you described, or you both described at the end, what are the other kind of hallmarks that would lead to this being called expressionist? Because I wasn't really seeing it, to be quite honest.
I think part of the reason is just the historical context, like expressionism as an artistic movement in Central Europe, especially like Germany and also to an extent Austria at that time. I think that's mostly the reason why people call it expressionist. But like if someone wants to say no, it's not truly expressionistic because it's only that one scene, I don't think that would be too controversial to say.
I also think the pace was very expressionist, and the coloring, maybe it's because of restoration, but I think the coloring of the film, different colors, which were very weird, sometimes I think blue, sometimes yellow, sometimes green. I may be wrong about the particular colors, and I may be wrong whether it qualifies the movie as expressionist, but I think it did click for me, not as some kind of distorted in the way, for example, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is, but overall I think the pace was very similar, for example, to Metropolis. So
I mean, this kind of color tinting was definitely also present in films outside of expressionism, but I get what you mean. Like it definitely sets a certain weird mood, I guess, especially now 100 years later, where something like that is almost unthinkable in modern cinema. When's the last time a film was color tinted like that? I don't think that even happened outside the silent era.
Yeah, I thought that there are some of these scenes inside this synagogue. Was that is that sort of what do you call it? It was that built. It looked. I saw. I think it looked exactly like some of the old Dreyer movies when he was making also silent movies in style. Was that a set?
I'm not sure. I think I read that they had to build some weird sets because they weren't allowed to film everywhere where they wanted to shoot. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that specifically.
Is it true that I read that also that the director was actually shot and killed not long after finishing this movie?
I think it was the man who wrote the book on which the film was based was shot, I think, after the film came out. So the book came out a couple of years before the film was made. And the book apparently sold really well, was translated into loads of languages, but it was not until the film was made that I guess it inflamed a lot of anger among some communities. And yeah, so that's how he died. If I have that correctly, I think I read that earlier, yeah.
Apparently the murderer of this author of this novel was sent to psychiatric institution. After 2 years he was released because of Nazism and the demands of the people, and afterwards apparently he was an unrepentant Nazi, and he lived up until 1990, and apparently after the World War II he boasted of killing this novelist, which is a pity that the person who has had an opportunity to understand that what he did was wrong, that he didn't.
But it's also sort of like it sets how at that time when the movie was made and this book was written, that anti-Semitism was extremely strong, and not just in Austria but across Europe, and had been for many years. So I guess that's also why sort of the things that he displays, that even though they come true later on much more, it was in the political environment and the way society treated Jews and had been for years.
Yeah. I was thinking that when I read about the film being prophetic, I was sort of like, well, maybe around that time it was all kind of being discussed anyway, so maybe not as prophetic as maybe we'd like it to be.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely true. That makes me think of this very famous book, which I haven't read, full disclosure, From Caligari to Hitler by Siegfried Kracauer, this very famous Austrian, I guess, philosopher slash film theorist, who also fled the country. He lived in the early 20th century, and he fled the country to America. And there he wrote this very famous book where he looked at what at the time was seen as like popular entertainment films, like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or Metropolis or Nosferatu. And again, I haven't read the book, but I could almost bet that City Without Shoes gets at least a mention in there, because he looks at these films having the context of World War II. I think he wrote it in the 50s or something like that. And he goes back to these films that were made in the 20s, and what he sees in them is exactly that, this kind of, I guess, semi-prophetic, more like an understanding of the political atmosphere of the time that was maybe not as explicit as in City Without Shoes, but at least present in these themes of, for example, Caligari is the prime example, of course, it's in the name of the book, where we have this hypnotist who controls the sleepwalker. He's this master criminal who controls the sleeping person to commit acts that he would never do when while being awake, and he sees in that a kind of let's use the word prophecy for now, for National Socialism. Also in something like the Dr. Mabuse films, where we again have this master criminal hypnotist. And yeah, I mean, it's a very widely discussed and also criticized book. Like it's not at all uncontroversial, this kind of reading, but it's at least interesting, I think. And in City Without Shoes, it's like as explicit as it gets. That's why I think it's such an interesting example. Like you have to use way less imagination to see why this film is being seen as prophetic, even if it's maybe just like a good analysis of current politics. And maybe speaking of current politics, I mean, I kind of in the introduction talked about how I think it mirrors modern day America, for example. Yeah, what do you guys think? Is that like a fair comparison to make? It's definitely a contentious point of discussion whether or not you can draw these comparisons between 1920s, 1930s Germany / Austria and anything in the modern day. So yeah, it'd be interesting if to hear if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Also here in Denmark, these discussions are ongoing, and certain political parties are trying their best, sort of to position themselves. Now it's not Jews; it's of course it's Muslims that are being targeted, but it's sort of this the same economic arguments that's going on. That on the one hand, they are some groups that are being labeled as an economic burden, and others will claim that no, they are taking all the low income jobs that make society go, and everything would collapse if they were being expelled or something. And so that's sadly the political environment in many countries all over Europe.
I think it's also similar in Russia, especially regarding the discussions around migrants, illegal migrants, etc. And I think I read in an article in New York Times today that was also about America, but with similar stuff, that when you try to expel people who have been living in a country for some time, like, for example, they do in Minnesota, you end up with inhumanities and some really bad stuff being committed. And this expulsion will always be inhumane. So I think, on the one hand, one should think about whom do you let inside the country, because you can't peacefully expel them later once they start living there, and it would be inhumane to do so. So I think there is an argument for restricting immigration, at least, but also how to deal with people who are already living, and of course one should always approach with the priority of doing something humane, and other stuff like economics can be on lower priority. I guess that's my understanding. I also think it's necessary to discuss maybe Israel is doing, I think, a lot of similar stuff maybe on a different scale, on a different level, and it's a complex situation, but in Palestine, and I think there are actually really great films currently being made by about Palestine. I really liked the voice of Hint Rajab and All That's Left to You, and I think they also are focused on advocating for humanity and against violence in the similar way that the city without Jews is also advocating for humanity. So yeah, that's if we're talking a little bit about politics, I guess.
I think, yeah, that's why that's what makes a really good satire can be, this film it's not just about Jewish people. It can be sort of taken in the modern context in, whatever's going on today. I think we're kind of like political satire, I guess, film or television even today. I think we've become a lot more sophisticated than the way that this film was made. So I don't know if anyone would like to, has any like more modern or other filmmakers or that make satirical films that they'd like to mention. But something I noticed in this film was that certain things were a little bit unsophisticated for today's taste, maybe. So, for example, the fact that just doing a political U-turn and like letting all the people that you've just expelled back in is sort of like, that's something that would, that happened in the world of this film, but it's not really something that's done in the real world. I had something else to say, but I can't remember what it was. But yeah.
I don't know. Are we at this moment having great satire, or is I actually just sort of on top of my head is that I think that there's very little satire. There are some comedies but political satire is something that I think of from my childhood that were in television, and also like I grew up watching some of the also many English satire, Yes Minister and so on, and I don't. I think that political satire is it's a very small minority group of people that are making and watching that and has been for many years. I don't. So, yeah, I don't know.
I guess I think the satire in the traditional way maybe largely has transformed into black comedy, and there's plenty of black comedies released. For example, from last year, I really like Bugonia. I think it's a wonderful absurdist black comedy that goes beyond very traditional cinema. And I guess this, I don't know, but I think the like 1970s, 1980s, I may be wrong, but was the time when traditional political satire ended, and I think nowadays it's maybe like something like black comedy, but
I guess I was just thinking of like, Rasmus, you mentioned Yes Minister, which I also watched, and is, I think, sort of set the tone for stuff that was made after that. So like British filmmakers like Chris Morris or Armando Iannucci, that I guess I would call where satire evolved to, at least in that era. And I'm not sure about today, although they're both still making films and shows and things. So
Yeah, I agree that it feels like we're not getting a lot of political satire in cinema, at least. Although I agree that Begonia was really good, I also really liked it. But I think where political satire is really thriving is, of course, online, where you basically can find literally political satire about anything every day. 10,000 videos, you can watch it all day, every day, literally. Of course, most of it is probably trash, but there's also some good political satire on the internet. You can find it if you're looking for it, I think. Which is a totally different discussion in what way we should count maybe something like YouTube towards cinema. I think this is a very interesting discussion to have had. Maybe not for this episode, though.
But if I think you're right. I think you're right. But it could be this, that having difficult topics raised and how movies can sort of make statements also political. I think that's important. Philip, you mentioned some of these newer movies from Palestine and so on, and I must admit that those are some of those that I haven't watched them, and I don't think that I can. I know what they are about. I know how what they are saying, and I know they are horrible, and I simply I can't watch it because it's too much. And I'm glad they are being made, and I hope many people watch them and so on. But the horrors they are displaying, it's simply it will break me emotionally, and that is where something like this is. I can handle this kind of of movie, of course, but some things are just, they are too painful, at least for me.
Yeah, I guess I understand you, but I think the best films, at least for me, are the ones that are, I think I'd call them liminal. So they're on some kind of boundary between what, I don't know, but they are balancing, and I think that's what makes films great. At least, even for example, I think Tarkovsky films are also liminal, but it's hard to formulate it more clearly, I guess, for me, at least now.
And then there's also, of course, the question if there even can be something like a truly apolitical film, which is something that's also being discussed all the time. I probably think it's very difficult to do a truly apolitical film because, culture is such a weird, and politics as part of culture is such a weird broad net that's above everything and below everything, and that we are a part of, and trying to look at it from the outside even is impossible, but trying to completely kind of not make politics part of a film or of any cultural product, really. I think it's probably, at least on a practical level, impossible. Maybe not theoretically, but practically, I think it's probably impossible. But I don't know if you guys have thoughts about that.
I agree with you, I guess.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Basically.
And I guess that the way I when I watch a movie, I'm constantly looking for sort of historical background, cultural. At what point in history has this been made, and so on. So it's sort of the way, one of the ways that I look at movies. So yeah, of course.
Yeah, I guess I can start. I can recommend to watch Godard movies, especially his later ones. They're very political, very liminal, very untraditional, but also very interesting. Although challenging, but...
I guess I can recommend. I'm just looking through which Chris Morris. I don't know if you guys, probably you are already familiar with Chris Morris, who's an English satirist who started off, I guess, writing and presenting a spoof news show. That's sort of quite surreal, but it also plays on, I guess, political hot topics around that time. And then he went on to make several films. And I guess I can recommend one that I saw recently is called The Day Shall Come. And I think it's a good example of a modern satire. So that's my pick.
Yeah. I also, I don't know how similar it is, but the movie Where Do We Go Now by Nadine Labaki, about this a little village where half of the people are Christian and the other half is Muslims, and how they have lived peacefully for many years, and then suddenly they turn against each other, and how to deal with that. It's also on one level a comedy, and other level it's heartbreaking, and it's extremely good, and not many people have seen it, at least people I talk to. So that's a big recommendation.
Hey, yeah, I guess I have two little recommendations. One of them is another film from the same time period and place. It's called The Golem, or How He Came into the World, something like that. It's a film that, when I today read the Wikipedia page of City Without Shoes, it was kind of compared to in an interesting way, because it also deals with the Jewish population in kind of a Germanic setting, but in a very different way, where the Jewish people live in their own kind of city, and the quote-unquote Germanic Christian people, blah blah, come from outside into the city and try to destroy it. Very interesting and a very great film in its own right. And a more modern film that kind of reminds me of this is Lars von Trier's Dogville, which is also a fantastic movie about a young woman in this case being exploited by an American town. This is really, I think, one of the great modern satires, but it's way less funny. Like it's a really dark and brutal movie and difficult to watch. But this, I think, is really one of the brilliant modern satires.
Yeah, I agree. Lars von Trier is he's always good.
Not always, but mostly, yeah.
He's not boring. He's never boring.
That's true. That's true.
That's true.
So, is that it? Then I guess all of us just have to say goodbye. Thank you for listening, and like and subscribe, and please share this media with your friends.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.